Well, welcome to Enabling New Services with CPaaS and SBCs. You know, the programmable telecommunications network has always intrigued me. As a developer, having the ability to create custom applications within the service provider network seems to have endless possibilities. I can envision all sorts of applications that can make businesses more productive and consumers better informed. I can also envision business opportunities for service providers offering hosted development platforms that developers can use to create new customer-facing services. Well, Communications Platforms as a Service, or CPaaS, is a means to offer an open API-based development environment to businesses of all sizes, allowing them to build custom business applications to improve their customer experience and better secure their data. Today, we plan to explore the opportunities for CPaaS, explain how service providers can integrate CPaaS into their existing network, and a review of a live customer case study of CPaaS in action. So let's get started. I'm Alan Percy, Chief Marketing Officer for TelcoBridges and today's event moderator. Joining us today is Kevin Nethercott. He is the Chief Commercial Officer with Telestax. Kevin has over 25 years of experience in launching companies and doing business development globally. His focus has been in the unified communications, the VoIP, and WebRTC spaces. And Kevin, thanks for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to join you.
Great. And also joining us is Jamie Hash. He serves as the Chief Operating Officer for Network Intelligence and is the co-founder of Network Intelligence Managed Services. He has more than 25 years of experience as an executive and entrepreneur within the telecommunications and data networking industries. And Jamie, we really look forward to hearing about your implementation today.
Glad to be here, Alan.
Awesome. All right, so just a quick note on the agenda, and then we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So we've got obviously completed our introductions today. We got some background on the Communications Platform as a Service. We'll be discussing some use cases for CPaaS, and then we'll move on, and I'll be delivering a presentation about protecting and managing CPaaS services with SBCs and the role that they play. And then Jamie's going to finish things up with a case study of how Network Intelligence has implemented their CPaaS platform, and of course we'll finish up with your questions. All right, so we're going to start out with a little discussion about CPaaS and its discussion. And Kevin, I'm going to turn the stage to you, and I'll move it to your first slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. If I slip into Japanese during the conversation here, I'm actually calling in from Tokyo, so either it's going to be in Japanese or you may hear some snoring as it's past midnight here. But I'm excited to be with the group and share with you a little bit about what we're doing here at Telestax, and more importantly, hopefully share some experience around what CPaaS is meaning to the market out there, because it's a really, really hot topic and a great business to be in. So I think, Alan, you did a great job of kind of introducing CPaaS. We all know now that it stands for Communications Platform as a Service. And really, at the end of the day, what CPaaS is able to do is hide all of the complexities of the telephony network, whether that's voice, whether that's messaging, and give really easy to use RESTful APIs as a way to access the network. And so it gives you a programmable way to access voice services, messaging services, and also often WebRTC. The benefit of being able to do that is it creates much easier ways to communicate. Rather than having to buy a whole PBX to provide some communications for your organization, you can now consume single features as part of an application, or more importantly, as part of a workflow or an enabled business communications environment. And this helps organizations become much more efficient. In most cases, it saves organizations a lot of money. And on the flip side, if you're in the business, by being able to extract this higher level capability from your network, you're often able to charge more for your network services as well. And so we're seeing significantly higher margins and better and different applications that you can implement and provide to your customers. Alan, next slide. So what I wanted to do is start by taking a look, how we got here and how the market is recognizing the value of this type of business model. So if we look at where we've been with on-premise equipment, the traditional PBX, everything was really on-prem and in one way in our communications. As we've been able to move forward, we've had companies like RingCentral, 8x8, Vonage, and others that have moved communications to the cloud in kind of a UCaaS or a hosted PBX type of environment. And what's happened is that's a much more efficient business model. It's easier to scale that model. And so Wall Street is also recognizing this model as more valuable. And so you'll notice in the graphics here how on-prem type companies are being valued at 1x revenue. Cloud communications, UC type companies, are averaging maybe around 8x. But then if we take that even a step further and look at CPaaS and companies like Twilio, where we're now taking cloud communications and being able to break up those capabilities and make it even easier to access and use, we're seeing crazy valuations of 20x revenue. So I like to share this because as we look at this, it isn't just about the technology, it's about the business model. And so as we have our conversation today, I want you to think about this in a 360-degree way of how this can impact your business. Next slide. So one of the things that we look at is that we're in a very important transition point in the CPaaS market. And so I like to refer to this as CPaaS 1.0 and 2.0. And so I would define 1.0 as focused on the developer. So if we look at companies like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, I don't know that they could exist or be at the success level that they are without having access to a CPaaS and being able to use number masking and other APIs to enable their applications. And it's clear that there's some winners in that space that were very successful in developing these applications and the APIs to support them. As big as that opportunity has been, CPaaS 2.0 is significantly bigger because CPaaS 2.0 is focused on the enterprise. And so if we think about the opportunity that's out there, if we look historically, we go from 15 to 20 years ago where we had TDM switches and we went to VoIP or SIP as a huge shift in our industry. And I remember at the time, everybody's going like, the quality's not good, or this is difficult, it's software, it's different. But at the end of the day, every single service provider implemented a SIP-based network. You wouldn't be in business today without it. The same thing is now starting to happen with APIs. And so CPaaS 2.0 is all about bringing the communication services over the top through an API rather than through a SIP trunk. And so literally every service provider over the next 5 to 10 years will have to implement some type of API strategy to interface and work with the enterprise. And that's why the 2.0 is such a huge opportunity. It's just getting started and we can all participate in that. Next slide. Now the reason that the enterprise is so interesting is because what's happening around digital transformation or DX. Research is showing us that enterprises are now, there's more than 50% of them are now implementing their DX strategy. And so that's thousands and thousands of companies now that are trying to figure out how does communications fit into my digital transformation. The numbers are out there. Next slide. The reason that this is important and why this is happening is because it is so competitive out there. The number one priority for companies that we're seeing today is how they can improve the customer experience. So if we think about the demographics of consumers out there, there's a number of large differentiated groups. The younger generation, and I would say anybody 60 or younger fits, we now prefer texting over phone calls. And so if I'm going to have an experience that my consumers can use, it can't just be an inbound phone call to a call center. I have to have different options. I have to allow the customer to engage with me and my brand on the channel that they prefer. And it has to be a really rich, good experience, or frankly, they'll just go to your competition. And so we're seeing significant investment into the customer experience. The other advantages of digital transformation and where budgets are being implemented is around cost savings, more efficiency for employees, better collaboration. These are all things that CPaaS really, really can deliver on. And so next slide, Alan. So the result of this is a growing market that's just crazy. We've got the UCaaS market that's a cloud-based service that's growing at 18%. We've got call centers as a service that are growing at 21%. And then to cap it all off, we're seeing 38% growth in the CPaaS market. We're expecting $11 billion in the market here in just the next 2 or 3 years. The reason for this is that we already have, we know that we're going to go from 5% to 30% enterprises that are going to consume CPaaS-based services. We've talked about this digital transformation. So IT departments are allocating 40% of their budget towards communications. This is one of the highest levels that we've seen in years. And so there's a lot of budget that's there for these services. And we also know that enterprises are committed to APIs as their way that they're going to architect their internal networks and work internally and with outside SaaS platforms and so forth. And so APIs are absolutely the way that they're going to engage and work with you and with your telephony and messaging services with your network. Next slide. And so if we look at this, we really are talking about an enterprise class requirement. And so you're able to connect into your communications contact center, you're integrating into your enterprise applications, you're able to work with one vendor to do all of this. It's being provided in a secure, modern way of doing that. And this also allows for an easier international expansion. Next slide. And so what I wanted to do is just share with you what some of the key use cases are that have been built on our platform as a CPaaS. So I've kind of divided this into 3 different lists. The one on the left is more platform oriented. So with our CPaaS platform, you're able to build a full functioning PBX or UCaaS. We can support conferencing and call centers. We're actually doing some work with RCS now. And so from a true kind of carrier service provider perspective, we're not opening APIs at the top of a product level. The API and the platform is at the core, and these types of next generation platform oriented use cases are built on top of us. The middle section here are services that are now being put into the catalog. They have a SKU associated with them. So through a CPaaS, you can sell IVR services, virtual assistants, text-to-speech, speech recognition, call recording. And then SMS services are really, really important. If we look at one-time password and two-factor authentication, these types of SMS-based use cases are huge conveniences, and they generate great, great margin. So these are easy to sell and implement for your customers. And then the right-hand channel or side here are just different actual use cases that many of our customers have been implementing. So things like number masking, where you're able, again, using Uber as an example, you're able to hide your personal information, and it gives you an ability to access or interact in a more public way without giving up your individual information, one number services, CRM integration, workflow management. These are all types of things that CPaaS is being used for, plus 100 more. But this gives you a little bit of flavor of with the CPaaS, you can do very robust platform-oriented types of products down to very simple, reminders or alerts with an SMS message. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to touch on is a sector of the CPaaS market, which is referred to as CPaaS enablement. And so this is the business model we here at Telestax implement, where we actually partner with service providers to help you become your own CPaaS. And we think that this is a really powerful model because with that type of partnership, we're able to provide a higher quality product than an over-the-top CPaaS play, because it's on your network where you handle the QoS from end to end. You have accountability and diagnostics across your network where an over-the-top type of use case would not. You also have probably better pricing because this is your core business. You layer on the CPaaS features, and so you can be very competitive in the, going head-to-head in the market from a pricing perspective. And this gives you more access to global markets. And because of your long-term relationships with your customers, they prefer one vendor. What we're finding since the first of the year is that many businesses are starting to call their carrier, their service provider, and say, hey, I want to connect Salesforce.com to your network. Do you have APIs to do that? And today, 90% of service providers say, sorry, we don't. That doesn't need to be the case. You can use CPaaS services to enable that for your customers. The next slide just talks about the market in that we're seeing great global expansion of CPaaS. We've got carrier partners in Indonesia and Japan and the Middle East, in Southern America. So it's not just a US thing anymore. And so for those that are looking at international expansion, or maybe there's those of you participating that are calling in from overseas, there's an ability with CPaaS enablement to really provide a local implementation that works well in your market. And that's a huge growth opportunity. Next slide. And so just as a summary, I wanted to just kind of share just some brief history on Telestax, so you know where we're coming from and how we got here. But originally Telestax was a spin out from Red Hat. We actually operated and managed the largest communications open source community out there that was called Restcomm. That was kind of phase one of our business. Phase two is we took that and created on-premise licensed enterprise products and sold those components around the world. And you'll find that software and our open source software in nearly every tier one carrier. Our SIP stack is the most deployed around the world on what we've built out. And so we took that experience of helping other carriers move to the cloud and virtualize their networks. And now we're able to do that through our own cloud offering. And so basically what we do is we have a bring your own carrier white label where we use our technology stacks that we host on the cloud. And then we connect to you through a SIP trunk or an SMTP connection for messaging. And then we white label our whole platform so everything is your brand. And so it allows you to generate this new traffic on your network with your phone numbers, with your brand. And through this, we can then work together with your installed base to then go upsell these new and interesting high margin applications. So I appreciate the time to share this background with you, and look forward to answering any questions here at the end of the session. But CPaaS is where it's at, and I'm glad that you spent some time with us here this morning. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Great introduction, great overview for the market, and great description of how service providers can leverage it. So thanks so much for bringing that to the table. All right, so I wanted to move on to talk about the role of session border controllers in delivering CPaaS services, and this is where the rubber sort of hits the road. And this is the role that TelcoBridges, of course, is very familiar with. And I know many of you are very familiar with the company, but I do see some new fresh faces and some new folks that have maybe not been exposed to TelcoBridges. I just want to spend a moment, introduce the company. We're a privately held company founded in 2002, about 35 employees based outside of Montreal, highly focused on scalable, reliable service provider media gateways, signaling gateways, STPs, and more recently, session border controllers. And that's what we're going to be talking about today relative to that. So TelcoBridges offers two session border controller offerings, one free SBC and Pro SBC. They're both derivatives of the media gateway technology that we've developed over the last 15 years. And free SBC is really targeted towards a slightly different market. It's great for people that are looking to evaluate the SBC technology or begin to start to work with it. Tier 2 and 3 service providers and small medium businesses find it useful. They use the use cases of access and peering. With the open source communities really adopted it in a big way. And it's very easy to download and to use, to install, and it's free with an annual renewal. All you need to do is just renew your free license annually, and a developer, a system designer can build out some basic functionality with our free SBC. We've introduced a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I should say, a bigger, better offering called Pro SBC, and this is targeted towards bigger solutions in the service provider and enterprise space. It added a number of features and functions to enable new use cases and for commercial applications. And it's a very cost-effective dollar per session per year subscription-based pricing, and there's a few upgrades on top of that for support, professional services, and other functions. So this, at a nutshell, what we do. So how does an SBC and a CPaaS platform work together? In this diagram here, very simplified architecture showing here SIP trunks that might come in from a service provider that has an existing SIP trunk infrastructure environment. Typically would bring those in through a session border controller to be hosted on a cloud platform, and AWS or Azure are very typical. It's not unusual for us also to see this being done on the service provider's own cloud environment, and then delivering this into a hosted Telestax or CPaaS platform. Might be a single server, might be multiple servers, it might be a quite complex implementation with different hosted environments. But this is the basic architecture for the environment, and the two work together. And the function for the session border controller, a big piece of it is in traffic management. One of the things that is critical is to be able to manage the traffic go into these CPaaS platforms, to deal with surge environments, right? Tickets being sold, natural disasters, news events, these kinds of things that cause these tremendous surges in traffic, to be able to manage that. And the traffic management functionality within the SBC can distribute calls based on dialed number, based on availability. It could distribute it round robin amongst multiple servers, but also traffic limiting, right? So it can protect the servers from overload situations that cause crashes, and to do intelligent traffic grooming, maybe slightly delaying traffic, allowing the server to catch up, which a user would perceive as maybe a slow to respond answer, but at least it got answered. These kinds of things. So traffic management is a critical role for the SBC. But there's other functions too, and one of them is interoperability. There's usually some little weird oddity between the SIP that comes from the SIP trunks from a service provider and maybe what Restcomm expects. There might have to be little modifications to the SIP headers. There might have to be fix-ups to the dial plan. In other cases, there might be reason code mapping, where things don't just quite line up. And then, of course, then there's media conversion, converting from maybe a wireless codec back to G711 for some of the speech features, or detecting DTMF in band and then putting it into the SIP notify kind of messaging in the out-of-band SIP protocol. So interoperability is a big part. As we discussed, routing is an important part, right? Being able to forward calls based on the dialed number. There might be some more complex script-based rules. Little details that might be hidden in the call metadata might drive routing as to which application you would send a call to. And then conversely, with calls going the other direction, right, based on call number and availability to SIP trunks, et cetera, would be a big part of an overall architecture. And this will be something you'll see in the use case as we get going. And then finally, then there's also survivability, right? Detecting that maybe, of a bank of servers, maybe one of them is either out of service for maintenance, or maybe there's a failure at the trunk level or server level, and then redirecting traffic to available circuits that can pick up the load, and managing failovers in the network. And additionally, also providing high availability and 1+1 redundancy with a backup server environment. So survivability seems to come up kind of late in the design, and this is an important part of the overall strategy. So we have lots about, and of those of you who've been listening to the webinar series, we've got all kinds of content on our freesbc.com website, and we encourage you to take a look at that. We also have some vibrant discussions in our forums at forums.freesbc.com. And we have a whole host of, I think now there's 18 recorded webinars on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/TelcoBridges. And this is part of a complex set of features and functions that when we were kind of trying to come up with a graphic that this word cloud on the right really captures. There's so many things that make up a session border controller, and all these features and functions come together to deliver a single reliable platform to build new solutions on. And we think that CPaaS and SBCs are really a great hand-in-glove kind of 1+1 environment where we can deliver highly reliable services, and thus the relationship with Telestax. All right, and so with that, we're going to move on and talk about an actual implementation that Jamie's put together at Network Intelligence. And so Jamie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can share your story.
Thank you. Network Intelligence has been around for quite a while. We actually were founded back in 1985 as a pure consultancy. And during that time, we've worked with RBox, Felix, independent operating companies, vendors, and of course, end users as well. And recently, we had the privilege of starting to work with Telestax, and we became the first certified managed service provider for Restcomm 1, which is the Telestax CPaaS platform. I'm pleased to say that we've been working with them now for well over 3 years, and we're at the point now where we're deploying services, not only using the Restcomm platform, but also using Pro SBC. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Before I get into a lot of this, though, I'd kind of like to sit down and define CPaaS the way we use it to deploy services today. And what we define CPaaS as a real-time business process management and control tool. It's really all about automation, integration, and optimization of services. And one of the value propositions that we saw early on was the ability to uncouple CPaaS services from network services. Because right now, most service providers are going to deliver those as a bundled service. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to go in and provide these kind of services and overlay them on someone's legacy carrier network. Sort of almost a bring your own network solution as opposed to a bring your own carrier solution. And still provide the functionality to do integration, optimization, and automation. Obviously, each one of those is going to carry a little bit different value proposition. When we talk about integration, we talk about APIs, the ability to manage them both inbound and outbound from the platform. The media, inbound and outbound, being in this case, it could be voice, video, or text. And the optimization obviously has to do with elimination of redundant processes and scripting new processes. So you basically optimize what you've already got. CPaaS is very important to point out here is that you don't throw anything away. You can keep everything you've got today and just overlay the CPaaS technology on top of it. And then last, of course, is the automation of those processes. And obviously, we all want to be able to do that because we want to be able to show how you can implement the CPaaS onto a legacy network. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. I thought one of the things that I would discuss, first of all, before I got into the various aspects of CPaaS, was how we use our session border controllers in our network today to deliver services. And the graphic that I've got on the screen right now basically shows either a voice communication or a mobile voice communication, or in this case, SMS. And we come in using the voice to Pro SBC, and then we would deploy those services across our voice carriers and eventually to an end user. And we do that today with voice call center traffic, we do it with enterprise applications, and we do it with SMS, but we only do it at the SMS layer in this particular diagram. And that's why I refer to this as a physical layer session border controlled network. And I don't know how many people are familiar with an ISO model. I don't want to get into it, but there are 7 layers to an ISO model. This represents the physical portion of that ISO model. Go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that you do when you add the Pro SBC capabilities along with the Restcomm capabilities for CPaaS is you create a new entity. And in this case, what we do is we take the physical layer switching that's provided to us by Pro SBC, and we add on the Restcomm capabilities. In this case, we like to think of that as the applications layer. And we create something that's entirely different and new, which we like to refer to as an applications border controller, because you're not only controlling the physical aspects of communications, but you're controlling the applications that are running across it. It's nice to say that, once you get all this stuff working together, you then start layering on all the different applications and use cases that you see off to the right-hand side, the auto dialer, the messaging, business IVR. There are tons of scheduling capabilities. You can do traditional voice call centers, and you can do API access for both databases and third-party applications. And that's where things really get interesting, because now you can take a traditional voice call center application and you can provide access to the databases that will allow you to then integrate SMS onto that call center. Very seamless, and the way we use it in the use case that I'm going to be talking about, it'll actually make the transition from voice to SMS for you so that you don't have to re-enter a 10-digit number in order to send an SMS. And that's one of the nice things about this system is that you can start out using one media, in this case voice, and you can convert it to another form of media, in this case SMS. Go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. I talked a little bit about the application or use case that we were going to talk about today. We have a product that we call IVR-Xchange. And IVR-Xchange is a member of our branded version of Restcomm, which we call Sentient Cloud Services. Sentient Cloud Services integrates not only voice applications, but SMS and video applications as well. And if you look at this slide, you'll see that the IVR-Xchange, in this case, is acting as a gateway for all the applications that you see over on the right-hand side. Obviously, the simple one would be an auto attendant. You might add on a conference bridge. You could add on voicemail, or you could even convert the voice conversation over to SMS and texting. And the really nice thing about the system, like I said, is that it's smart enough, intelligent enough, and has the capabilities to not only accept that voice call and give them the option on how to move forward, or it could convert that to texting and allow them to continue the conversation using SMS. We find that this is a very powerful application, especially when used in a call center environment, because the cost of managing the callers is driven down by the use of SMS. And the actual cost of that interchange that you have with your client is significantly reduced, not only from a manpower perspective, but also from an ease of access. Because a lot of people, to be quite frank with you, prefer to communicate using text. Let's go on to the next slide, please. In addition to that application, we've also incorporated a lot of the same applications that Kevin showed you earlier in his presentation. We not only can do the IVR-Xchange, which we just talked about, but we also do SMS and voice contact center integration. We do smart voicemail. We have multiple IoT solutions. We extensive use of chatbots, artificial intelligence chatbots. We find that they're very useful in scheduling and applications where you have someone in the service industry that wants to be able to integrate that kind of capability on an existing application. So if you had a doctor's office, or a dentist, even a mechanic who's trying to manage those services and manage their clientele, this makes it very easy for them to do. It's completely automated, and it uses SMS as the media. There are even real estate call capture applications, the two-factor authentication that Kevin mentioned earlier, hosted PBX, a various host of different applications that can be utilized. Next slide. The features that we incorporate into this particular use case, IVR-Xchange, and the others that were shown on the previous slide. Basically, what you're doing is you're providing yourself a programmable platform that allows you to build IVRs, integrate SMS, and integrate APIs at the same time. Very, very powerful for a service provider. One of the things that we like to do is we utilize a capability we refer to as voice-activated texting. And that's basically the one that I was talking about earlier when I said that the caller comes in using voice and he can be converted into an SMS call. This is done through text enablement of those voice circuits and through the CPaaS capabilities that set up the call, and then actually texts the caller back. It integrates very easily with a call center environment. And one of the beauties of it is that there's absolutely no disruption to existing services. Everything that's there and in place today stays there and is in place today. All the SIP connections are intact. And if there are any API integrations that are being used on the voice side today, they can be utilized on our CPaaS platform, our Sentient cloud services as well. The API integration is very flexible, and you can integrate with thousands of databases today. If you go on the internet, for instance, and just look up APIs, you can easily find on the internet several hundred, maybe even 1,000 there. And they're very simple sometimes. Sometimes it's, weather, sometimes it's time. There are GPS location applications that provide database information for mobile callers. A lot of different things that can be done, and a lot of different databases that are already out there and in use today. There's also a tremendous number of third-party applications that are accessible through APIs. And we take advantage of that, not only using Telestax's Restcomm marketplace to access various vendors that have already started using CPaaS technologies, but there are other vendors out there that can be integrated But they don't have to necessarily be voice applications. They can be SMS applications, video applications, the artificial intelligence chatbots that I talked about, a lot of those different types of applications. And the real beauty of this system is just how simple it is to implement it. Go ahead into the next slide, Alan. And it's a very rapid deployment because you can literally utilize the Restcomm system as well as the Pro SBC system to turn up services in a very, very short period of time. And like I said, the beauty of that is that it's going to protect your installed base. If you've got a large percentage of your existing services that are from voice carriers that do not support CPaaS functionality, you can now overlay that functionality on top of those carriers and then deliver the same services to your existing clientele. So it really does help you to enhance those legacy technologies, those legacy systems, and it prevents the bundled solutions like Twilio and Nexmo, Plivo, all the various vendors that are out there today that are delivering these type of services from stealing your customer away from you. They're very important because a lot of times it happens and you don't even know it. One of the things that we've seen is that all of a sudden your client will come back to you and go, oh, I just needed this little application done. And so I went to Twilio or I went to somebody else and I got this other application. And they don't even ask you because they know you don't have that capability. And that's one of the reasons why we're here, because we want to give people that capability. As a managed services provider, we can not only give them that capability, but we can also teach them how to go build systems that will actually duplicate anything that they could buy from these bundled solutions providers. We do that using a visual designer, and Restcomm supports what's called the Restcomm Visual Designer. And what it basically does is it's very much like a flow charting program that's used for developing use cases for CPaaS. And it tremendously shortens your time to market and the expense associated with any development, because 99% of the applications that are out there can be used or can be built using this Restcomm Visual Designer. You don't even have to go to a developer in order to do it. Very powerful. All of this together allows for graceful integration of legacy applications with CPaaS functionality. It also allows you to enhance features that are currently being delivered. It allows you to revitalize margins. And the reason it does that is because now you're not just delivering a voice application, or you're not just delivering an SMS application. You're delivering a bundled application running over your existing services or running over your existing carriers, and you can now charge more for that. Everybody's familiar with the race to zero that's been taking place inside the carrier space for the last decade. And this helps you to mitigate that race to zero, because now you add value to that service and you do it on your existing carrier services. There's also, in the model that we provide, is there's no capital investment for this. It's basically a cloud-based service, and you can buy that cloud-based service just like you would any other type of cloud-based service. So it actually is very easy for you to figure out how to do the margins and how to make money off of these solutions. And of course, like I said, it protects your investment in those cloud platforms. That pretty much wraps it up for me, Alan. Why don't we go on to your next slide and accept questions from people about what we previously discussed.
Great. Yep. Before we do that, the great presentation. Thanks so much. I just want to invite all our attendees to join us on the CPaaS forum. I created the CPaaS forum about 3 years ago on LinkedIn, and we've amassed pretty much the brain trust of the CPaaS community there. There's some great articles. Most of the participants have been really good about posting their events and thought leadership content. and there's some occasional feedback sessions on that content. And you can find that in LinkedIn. Either you can go just search for CPaaS Forum, or here's the URL for the group if you can't find it. All right, so let's move on to the Q&A and sort of the next steps. And before folks move on, I did want to point out that we've put together a landing page at www.telcobridges.com/CPaaS. Is a way that if for whatever reason you want to dig a little deeper in your situation, you want to talk about your specific situation, you're looking for a follow-up call where we can get the group together and talk about your particular situation. We'd love to do that. If you just go to that URL, just put your email address in and hit submit. We'll get the information we need to coordinate a conversation, a much more detailed conversation. And then with that, we'll move to the Q&A. And by the way, both presenters, you did an awesome job. And the best part is you left plenty of time for the Q&A. So hopefully our attendees feel free to go ahead and jump in and add their questions to the Q&A window. And we've got a handful of them here that have accumulated. I want to start with one from Ramon, who he says, it's clear Telestax works under an OpEx model with this Restcomm cloud platform, but does Telestax offer Restcomm under a CapEx model installed at the service provider premise? So Kevin, that's a good question for you.
Yeah, it is. It is. So appreciate that question. I think, so the short answer is that we do focus exclusively on cloud offerings. And so as Telestax, we have points of presence in North America, Europe, and in Asia. And so through that footprint, we're supporting 30 plus service providers globally via the cloud. And so if there's a need for something in country, we've got some different ways that we can approach that. But we do not offer a CapEx model today. It's all a usage-based model as partners. We really go to market together as partners and work in a transaction-based model.
And probably a natural follow-up question then. So, Jamie, it might make sense to just talk about the business model that your organization uses. You're a consumer, certainly, of Restcomm and of Pro SBC. How do you offer your services from a business model standpoint?
We offer our services basically as a managed service provider. And we can either build something for somebody and teach them how to run it, or we can provide services to an individual or to an enterprise level customer as a turnkey solution. The idea being is that we're, Kevin always used to like to refer to us as the farm team. And oftentimes what we found is that if you've got a new service provider that's out there, we can provide them with a risk-free trial that will allow them to kind of stick their toe in the water, if you want to say that, and play around with the system, learn how to use it a little bit. And then if they feel comfortable with the model going forward, they can either buy those services through us, or we can hand them back off to Telestax and they can provide them with services directly. And in doing so, what we do is we make it a lot easier for people to make that transition or make that leap into CPaaS. There's always a lot of confusion around how do you implement the technology, how do you bill for it, how do you basically build it into your operating systems. And we're not only there as a consultancy to help with that, but we're also there to help deliver those services, build them, and eventually hand them off, if need be, to the clientele or to the service provider.
Yep, it's good stuff. So Kevin, here's a great question I'm going to send to you, which is, so you're, imagine yourself as a service provider. How do they sell CPaaS? How is it envisioned that a service provider is going to monetize offering CPaaS services? How's that typically done?
No, that's a great question. And I think one of the keys to this answer is that it's changed. So I think in everyone's mind, when we hear CPaaS, we think APIs, we think the original Twilio model of supporting developers. for service providers particularly, run away from that model. That's not the way to go to market with CPaaS today. The way to go to market with CPaaS today for a service provider is really to focus on your customers. Your customers, through their digital transformation, are in need of a partner to help implement that. And so what we recommend is really focusing on initially one or two very simple use cases. So maybe that's something like a one-time password or two-factor authentication messaging application, or maybe that's IVR. And so these things are very similar to other services that you have today. And so it's much easier to get your sales teams engaged, understanding the product, and then being able to sell it. Once you have one application deployed with a customer, they will then bring you the use cases. And so then you're able to leverage the breadth of the platform and really be able to say yes to any implementation or use case that they might bring to you. And so it's really focusing in on your customer, starting with a very simple application that your sales team can understand and take to market. And then based on that, you've got your land and expand, where you can then offer a broader set of application possibilities or APIs to support their actual use cases.
Got it. Well, Jamie, here is a question for you that makes sense. So you showed us the IVR-Xchange use case, and what kind of effort would there be involved to do something similar to that? Maybe build a different application, but same basic idea.
It's a fairly easy process, Alan. I mentioned earlier in my presentation the Restcomm Visual Designer. What it allows you to do is it allows you to take an application and then go into the system, create the actual menus and the decision trees, much like I said, a flowchart is handled, and then implement it using the Pro SBC feeding the direct inward dial or toll-free number to that use case. And you kind of marry the two systems together, and then you basically switch it just like you would a traditional application for telephony, but instead of switching it from the incoming caller to, say, a call center, you might run it through the use case first on its way to the call center so that you can add functionality to it. And the Restcomm Visual Designer allows you to do that, because if you need to go access a database in order to figure out a real simple one for IVR-Xchange is determining whether it's a landline caller or a mobile caller. And the reason we do that is because that allows us to determine whether or not we want to offer them the ability to continue using SMS. Obviously, if you're calling from a landline, there's not much reason to offer them that in the first place. But once you've determined that they are a mobile caller, you can then make that transition, and it makes a lot of sense to the caller, because the system basically would then text them back to that mobile device. Okay. That's all been done, and that was actually one of the first applications that I built when I started to become familiar with the Restcomm Visual Designer.
I have to brag on Jamie here a minute. He's by no means a developer. Sorry, Jamie. But how many, you probably built 20, 30 plus applications just through the visual design tool, just, basically on your own. And so I think that's a great example of being able to really look at the business and the business flow, and then being able to implement that the way that you would like to without having to go back to a developer and do that. So I know in your first applications, you were creating those in an afternoon with no problem at all. And so Jamie's just done an awesome job of taking advantage of that tool. And it's a great example of how, others could take advantage of it as well.
Yep. I'll add something real quick, then we got one more question here, and then we'll wrap it up. I will tell you, I was at a hackathon a year and a half ago or so, and sat with a team that was using Restcomm to develop applications, and it was startlingly far less complex than I thought it was going to be, and we got quite a bit done very quickly. So Michael asked a question. He said, speed to market's been mentioned several times. Can you share some examples of how fast providers have been able to add CPaaS In other words, how fast can we onboard CPaaS as a service provider? So Kevin, I'm going to let you take a stab at that first.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think this is really one of our strong points. Our development team is really focused in on helping our partners get to market quickly. Literally, to get CPaaS enabled from a technical perspective, we can do it in an afternoon, because all we have to do is connect your SIP trunk into Restcomm. That's something that we, as carriers, we do all day long, is, SIP interconnects. And then if you have your own SMS network, it's a similar connection with an SMPP connection. And then what we've been able to do is create a white labeling tool that then comes in and allows you in about 15, 20 minutes to load your logo, your color scheme, your backsplash. There's a number of things that you can customize. And then when you hit finished, not only does the user experience get updated, which, that's a common theme, but actually all of the API documentation associated with the product, which is, tens of pages, hundreds of APIs, are all also updated in your branding and your name. And to the point where we actually hide, or not hide, but we implement your organization as part of the API calls. So from the outside world, it's 100% your brand, and we're able to set that up for you literally in just a few minutes. And so this used to take weeks. We've now got this down to, if we have the right people on each end of the call, we can literally do it in just a couple of hours. It takes the team much longer to get their marketing materials and their collateral ready to go than it does for the onboarding process to have you ready to go. And the minute you're connected, it's your production network, it's our production platform, and you're off and running.
Awesome. Well, listen, I'm looking at the clock. Looks like we're just about out of time. And I know we'll usually lose a lot of people to their next appointment. So first of all, I want to say thank you to both our presenters, Kevin and Jamie. Very informative. Appreciate all the content you delivered. And of course, I want to thank our attendees for listening in. It's been great to have you with us here in the live event today. And as I noted in the opening housekeeping, you'll be receiving an email within the next couple of days with a link to the slides and of course a recording of today's event. And please do share that content with others in your network that would find it useful. And with that, we're going to say that's it from here, and we're going to wish you all a good day and have an awesome day. Thank you.